In the dusty attic of her grandmother's house, Anna found an old music box with a small dancing clown. The object seemed decades old, with its peeling paint and rusty mechanism. When she turned the crank for the first time, a strangely familiar melody filled the air, though she was sure she'd never heard that music before. The small clown began to spin, but its movement seemed wrong, as if it were moving against its will. The more Anna watched, the more she noticed that the clown's painted face seemed to change expressions ever so slightly, its smile growing wider with each rotation. That night, she couldn't sleep, the melody playing endlessly in her mind, becoming more distorted with each mental repetition. The darkness in her room seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the remembered tune. The next morning, Anna discovered the music box on her bedside table, though she was certain she'd left it in the attic. The clown's position had changed, now facing directly toward her pillow instead of its original dancing pose. When she tried to move it, the mechanism started on its own, playing a slower, deeper version of the melody. The clown's eyes, previously just painted dots, now had depth to them, like tiny black holes pulling at her consciousness. She noticed small handprints in the dust around the box, too small to be hers, leading from the edge of her bed to the box itself. The room temperature dropped dramatically, and in the mirror across her room, she could see the reflection of the clown's head turning to follow her movements, though the actual figure remained stationary. Strange events began occurring throughout the house. The melody would play at random times, even when no one was near the box. Anna's parents complained of hearing circus music in the middle of the night, but when they checked, the box was silent. Small items began disappearing, only to reappear arranged in perfect circles around the music box. Anna started finding pieces of clown makeup in unexpected places. A bit of white grease paint on her pillow, a smear of red on the bathroom mirror, a perfect circle of blue under her bed. The house filled with the sickly sweet smell of ancient cotton candy and rust, strongest around the music box but present everywhere, like a living thing spreading through the air ducts. The clown's painted costume began to show different patterns each day, though no one ever touched it. During the third night, Anna woke to find the music box floating 3 feet above her dresser, spinning slowly in the air. The clown figure had grown to twice its original size, its limbs now jointed in places where no joints should be. The melody played backwards, each note stretching into an impossible length before snapping into the next. The clown's head rotated a full 360 degrees, while its body remained still, its painted smile now reaching literally from ear to ear. Small toys from Anna's childhood began crawling out of her closet, moving with jerky, puppet-like motions toward the floating music box. The air in the room became thick with a visible darkness that swirled and danced to the twisted melody. Anna tried to scream, but the sound came out as the same carnival tune that haunted her dreams. The clown began to climb out of the music box, its form distorting and growing as it emerged. What had been painted joints became real, mechanical parts, clicking and whirring with each movement. Its costume, once just painted metal, now flowed like real fabric made of shadows and spiderwebs. The face, still maintaining that terrible smile, began to crack like old porcelain, revealing pulsing red light beneath. The music grew louder, becoming a physical force that made the windows vibrate and the walls bend inward. Anna's old toys, now arranged in a perfect circle below the floating box, began to transform as well, their plastic and plush forms twisting into miniature versions of the nightmare clown above. The room itself seemed to be turning inside out, reality peeling away like old wallpaper to reveal a circus dimension beyond. As the clown fully emerged, standing impossibly tall in the distorted space of Anna's bedroom, its mechanical parts began to separate and float independently, connected by strands of dark energy that looked like puppet strings made of condensed shadow. Each piece moved with its own terrible purpose, creating a dance that defied physics and sanity. The being's head detached last, hovering above the mechanical nightmare like a twisted balloon, its smile now containing rows upon rows of clockwork teeth that spun like tiny gears. The temperature in the room plummeted so low that Anna's breath came out as crystals that chimed with the same carnival melody that started it all. The toys turned minions began a slow spiral dance around their master, their movements creating shapes in the air that hurt to look at. The walls of the room continued their transformation, becoming canvas tent material that rippled with shadows of impossible circus performances. The ceiling stretched upward into infinity, revealing tiers upon tiers of empty circus seats occupied only by shadows with glowing red eyes. The floor beneath Anna's bed transformed into sawdust that moved with purpose, forming patterns that spelled out words in a language that existed before time. The clown being raised its mechanical arms, each finger ending in a tiny music box that played a different part of the now massive symphony of horror. The air itself began to crystallize, forming mirrors that reflected versions of reality that should never exist. In each reflection, Anna saw herself transformed in different ways, always with that same terrible smile painted on her face. The mechanical horror that had once been a simple music box clown began to speak, its voice a combination of grinding gears, carnival music, and children's laughter played in reverse. "Every song needs an audience, Anna," it said, its words forming visible notes in the air that danced and cut like razors. "Every performance needs a performer." The tiny clown minions began to reach for Anna with hands that had too many fingers, each digit tipped with a tiny silver crank. The original music box, still floating in the center of the chaos, started to grow again, its open lid becoming a portal that showed glimpses of an eternal circus where the laws of physics and sanity held no meaning. The mechanical clown's smile grew impossibly wider, splitting its head completely in half to reveal a theater of horrors within. Dark energy began to pour from every joint and gear of the mechanical nightmare, forming a web that filled the room with a network of living shadows. Each intersection of the web held a tiny scene from Anna's life, but twisted and wrong, showing moments that never happened but somehow felt more real than her actual memories. The clown being's voice resonated through every shadow. "Join our eternal performance, Anna. Your seat in the audience awaits." The toy minions had completely surrounded her bed now, their combined mechanical movements creating a hypnotic rhythm that made her muscles move against her will. The music box portal pulsed with each beat, showing flashes of other children who had joined the nightmare circus, their faces frozen in eternal smiles as they performed impossible acts for an audience of shadows. The room's transformation reached its peak as reality itself began to fold like origami, creating impossible geometries that housed entire circus worlds within their creases. The mechanical clown's body had completely separated now, each part becoming its own autonomous performer in this nightmare show. The head floated at the center of everything, its split halves now spinning in opposite directions while singing a duet in that gear-grinding voice. The toy minions began to merge with the shadows, becoming part of the living web that filled the space. Anna felt her own body beginning to change, her joints wanting to move like the mechanical horror before her. The music box's melody had become a physical force, reshaping everything it touched into circus-themed abominations. Time itself began to distort in the room, moments stretching into eternities and then snapping back like rubber bands. Anna saw versions of herself from different times, all transforming at different rates into performers for the nightmare circus. The mechanical clown's voice echoed from every direction. The show must go on and on and on. The music box portal was now large enough to swallow the entire room, its edges blurring the line between reality and the eternal circus dimension. The toy minions had completed their transformation into shadow creatures, their forms suggesting things that human minds were never meant to comprehend. The air was thick with the sound of ticking gears and carnival music, each note carrying the weight of 1,000 twisted performances. As the final transformation began, Anna watched in horror as her room completely ceased to exist, replaced by an infinite big top that spiraled in impossible directions. The mechanical clown had become something beyond description, a collection of moving parts and shadows that suggested a form but never quite settled on one. The music box that started it all now served as the heart of this nightmare realm. Its melody the pulse that kept the eternal circus running. The toy minions had become the audience, their shadowy forms filling endless rows of seats that defied geometry. And in the center of it all, Anna felt herself becoming part of the performance, her body transforming into something that could exist in this realm of eternal entertainment and endless horror. I was home alone, the wind howling against the windows. Then a knock came at the door. When I opened it, there was no one, just a red balloon floating in the air. As I reached for it, a low, muffled laugh echoed, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. The balloon felt cold to the touch, sending a shiver down my spine. I looked around, but nothing seemed out of place. Yet, there was something moving in the corner of the room. A clown, with exaggerated makeup, was watching me from afar. His smile was too wide, almost grotesque. He stood there, frozen, as if waiting for something from me. The image of the clown wouldn't leave my mind. I decided to leave, but as soon as I opened the door, there he was again. The clown, with his red wig and odd nose, stood right in front of my house. I could feel his piercing gaze. His eyes were white, empty. He didn't move, only stared. I felt a chill and tried to slam the door, but he stopped it with his hand. That's when the laugh returned, louder, closer. I recoiled, trembling. The door slowly began to push inward, as if something invisible was forcing it open. The clown was gone, but the sense that he was nearby never faded. I turned off the lights and tried to sleep, but the sound of footsteps echoed through the house. When I opened my eyes, his shadow was outside the window. The clown stood there, his smile still stretched across his face. His head slowly turned from side to side, as if considering the best way to enter. I ran to the window, but he had disappeared. Yet his scent, something sour and decaying, lingered in the air. The next morning, I found something strange at my door, a small box, stained with something dark. When I opened it, a crumpled piece of paper was inside. It read, "I'll see you soon, little one." Then, another note followed. "The clown loves you." The strong smell of blood filled the air. There was something viscous and red inside the box. My stomach churned as an overwhelming sense of terror filled me. I was being watched. A muffled laugh echoed from outside, sending shivers down my spine. Nights grew stranger. I couldn't sleep without feeling like he was there waiting. One night, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there he was again, his smile grotesque, his teeth yellow and sharp. His face was distorted, as if it had been cut and poorly reassembled. He didn't speak, but his laugh filled my mind. I tried to close the door, but he pushed against it with an impossible force. His hands were cold as ice, but there was something more, something malevolent that made me feel powerless. That night, my nightmares grew more vivid. I saw the clown everywhere, in the shadows, on the streets, in the trees. He was watching me, getting closer every time I turned my face. He was always behind me, his empty eyes locked on my neck. His laugh echoed in my mind, growing louder with each passing second. I couldn't escape. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. But every time I woke, he was closer, and he knew my name. Each nightmare brought a new, darker message. One day, I decided to look in the mirror. Something told me it was time to face what haunted me. As I looked, I saw the clown behind me, his smile even wider and more grotesque. But when I tried to scream, he appeared in the mirror on the other side. His reflection was everywhere, as though he was invading every corner of my house. With every movement, his smile grew. Every time I looked away, he was closer, and the laughter, it never stopped. It was as if the mirror itself was sucking me in. I decided to run. I bolted through the house, but the hallways seemed endless. Every door I opened led to another, a different room, a stranger scene. The clown was in each of them, watching, waiting. I couldn't trust my own eyes anymore. The walls seemed to close in on me, the air growing heavier with every step. Each footfall echoed like a death sentence. I was trapped in a nightmare with no end, and the clown was the only constant. I tried to escape through the back door, but there he was again. He stood in the pitch-black darkness, but his smile lit up the room. I was so terrified I could barely breathe. His yellow, sharp teeth glistened in the dark. I ran toward my car, but he was there, faster than I could move. He appeared in the car window, his red nose and melting makeup revealing pale, sickly skin beneath. He was inside my head now, chasing me everywhere. I found an old journal in the attic, filled with yellowed, scratched pages. In the journal were accounts of the clown. He wasn't just any being. He was an entity, a creature fed by fear. Each victim he found became an extension of him. The clown's smile wasn't just a mask. It was the very essence of evil. He fed on my despair, my hopelessness. With every laugh I heard, he grew stronger, more present. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. So I left, but he followed me. He was everywhere. In the streets, in the stores, on the corners. I saw his reflection in windows, in mirrors. In every shadow, his smile awaited. He wasn't just haunting me anymore. He was becoming part of me. I felt his presence at my side, as if he was always watching. He was inside my mind now, in every thought. There was no escape. The clown began to play with me. He would let me escape for a while, only to corner me in a dark room. I thought I could run, but he was always there, waiting. Every move I made was anticipated. He knew what I was thinking, what I was feeling. It was as if he had total control over my reality. I started to doubt my sanity. Was he real, or was I losing my mind? Finally, he caught me. I was in a dark room, the walls closing in slowly. He approached smiling. I was at my breaking point, but suddenly he stopped. He looked at me and said, "You were always a part of me." The air grew dense and his smile faded, leaving only a horrible emptiness. The clown wasn't just an entity outside of me. He was inside me in my soul. What happened next is a blur. I felt my body change, becoming something I didn't recognize. The clown had taken over. I wasn't who I was before. The smile, the empty eyes, I felt them inside me. I was him now, and he was in me, controlling me. I didn't know if I was real anymore or just a shadow of the past. All I knew was that somehow I was now part of the nightmare. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see my reflection. The clown, he smiles at me and I smile back. The cycle is complete. I am him. He is me. And he never leaves. He has always been here, and now I am the nightmare that haunts others. I am the laugh that echoes in the shadows. I am the clown, and maybe you are too. I had never believed the old stories about the abandoned carnival at the edge of town. It was just a relic from the past, a place swallowed by time and decay. But when my best friend Mark dared me to sneak in with him one night, I couldn't say no. We climbed over the rusted gate, our flashlights casting eerie beams over crumbling rides and tattered tents. The air smelled of damp wood and something metallic, almost like blood. A sudden gust of wind made a carousel creak, the horses frozen in silent screams. "Creepy as hell," Mark muttered. I laughed, but my stomach twisted. The deeper we walked, the more suffocating the silence became. Then, something strange, a faint, distant tune. A calliope? It was impossible. There hadn't been power here in decades. "Do you hear that?" Mark whispered. My mouth was dry. Yeah, the music was coming from the funhouse. The funhouse loomed ahead, its once vibrant colors now faded and peeling. The entrance was a gaping mouth, teeth chipped and rotting. Mark grinned. "You scared?" I shook my head, lying. The music was louder now, playing a tune both whimsical and wrong. We stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking under our weight. The mirrors lining the walls reflected distorted versions of us, stretching and twisting. "This place is falling apart," Mark said. "Let's take a quick look," and a whisper cut him off. A child's giggle. The hairs on my arm stood up. "Who's there?" I called. No answer, just the laughter, closer this time. Then, from the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement. A clown, not a reflection, a real flesh and blood clown, standing at the end of the corridor, head tilted, smiling. Mark cursed, grabbing my arm. "Let's get the hell out of here." But the funhouse seemed different now, deeper, endless. The clown hadn't moved, yet its presence filled the space, pressing against us. The smile stretched too wide, teeth too sharp. "Move!" Mark shouted. We ran, twisting through mirrored corridors that seemed to shift, trapping us in a maze. The music sped up, discordant and frantic. The giggling multiplied, bouncing from all directions. I tripped, my hand slamming against a mirror. The glass rippled like water. "What the?" Mark pulled me up. "Keep going." Footsteps echoed behind us. Heavy, deliberate. We burst through a doorway into a room filled with clown mannequins. Identical, painted grins, blank eyes. One of them turned its head. The clown mannequins lined the room like silent spectators. Their grins stretched wide, frozen in eerie amusement. Mark and I stood frozen, our breaths shallow, our bodies tense. The one that moved twitched again, its head tilting to one side with a sickening crack. Then its hand jerked up, fingers curling as if beckoning us closer. I yanked Mark's arm. "We need to go. Now." But the door behind us was gone. In its place, another mirror. My reflection stared back, except it wasn't quite me. My face was wrong. The eyes sunken, the mouth grinning. My reflection winked. My stomach dropped. The mannequin shifted just slightly. The giggling returned, swirling around us like a phantom breeze. "Run!" Mark screamed. We plunged into the maze again, the walls narrowing, the music growing deafening. And behind us, footsteps, heavy, closer. The corridors twisted and stretched impossibly, leading us in circles. Every turn brought us back to the same grotesque smiling clown, standing motionless, waiting. Mark pounded on the walls. "This isn't real. It can't be." But the walls felt solid, the air thick with the stench of old wood and something rotten. My flashlight flickered, casting shifting shadows across the warped mirrors. I swore I saw something moving inside them. Not reflections, something alive. Watching, the whispering started again, voices overlapping in a strange, inhuman language. The air grew colder. My breath misted in front of me. Mark grabbed my wrist. "Over there!" A door, not a mirror, wood reel. We ran for it, shoving it open. Darkness swallowed us whole as we stumbled into the unknown. The door slammed behind us, the sound echoing like a gunshot. We were in a circular room, walls covered in masks. Hundreds of clown masks, all grinning, all staring. "This is a nightmare," Mark muttered. He reached for the door. Locked. Shit. The masks, something was wrong with them. They weren't just painted, they had depth. Flesh-like. I stepped closer, my breath catching. Eyes. There were real, human eyes behind the masks, staring. One blinked. I stumbled back. A deep chuckle filled the room. The masks started moving, their mouths opening and closing as if whispering to one another. Then one fell. Then another. They hit the floor with wet thuds. The wall behind them, it wasn't a wall at all. It was flesh. Pulsing, breathing flesh. A slow, rhythmic thudding sound filled the room. Like a heartbeat. Mark grabbed my sleeve. "We're getting out of here." But before we could move, a shadow stretched across the far side of the room. Something tall. Too tall. My flashlight sputtered. The darkness swallowed everything except for a pair of gleaming, yellow eyes. The giggling returned, deeper now, layered with something predatory. My throat tightened as a figure stepped forward. A clown, but not like the others. This one was wrong. Towering, its limbs too long, its grin splitting its face. It took a step. The floorboards groaned under its weight. "Mark, don't move," I whispered. But Mark bolted. The thing lunged. I screamed. I ran after Mark, my legs barely carrying me as the laughter echoed behind us. We pushed through another door, downstairs, spiraling into darkness. The air grew damp, the scent of decay overwhelming. Our footsteps splashed. Water? No, thicker. My flashlight caught a glimpse of the liquid. Deep red. Blood. "Keep moving." Mark gasped. The walls pulsed, veins snaking across them like roots. Something skittered in the shadows. The giggling followed us, closer now. Then a voice. "You shouldn't have come." It wasn't human. It came from everywhere at once, crawling under my skin. My flashlight flickered again. Ahead, another door. I slammed into it, shoving it open. We tumbled inside, and then silence. The room was cold, colder than anywhere else in the funhouse. My breath fogged in front of me. The walls here weren't mirrors, weren't flesh. They were stone. Mark groaned beside me, rubbing his head. "Where are we?" I had no answer. Then, my flashlight illuminated something ahead. Cages, dozens of them, rusted and old. And inside, bodies. Not corpses, but people. Their skin was pale, their eyes sunken, as if they had been here for decades. One lifted his head, lips cracked. "Please help us." My stomach turned. The realization hit me like a freight train. They weren't just prisoners. They were changing. Their fingers were elongating, their smiles widening unnaturally. "We need to leave," I whispered, but the door behind us was gone. A deep rumbling laugh filled the chamber. The people in the cages jerked upright, their heads snapping toward the ceiling. Something moved above us, a figure, dangling from marionette strings, its limbs jerking unnaturally as it descended. The clown. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't alive, not in the way we were. The strings controlled it, twisting it into a grotesque performance. "New guests," it rasped, head lolling to one side. "You'll make fine additions." My skin crawled. The strings reached for us, moving like living tendrils. Mark grabbed my hand. No way in hell. We ran, dodging grasping hands and slamming through a narrow passage. The walls trembled, as if the funhouse itself was alive. The passage led downward, the walls narrowing. The whispers returned, voices merging into one. "Stay with us, stay forever." My flashlight caught words carved into the walls. Names, thousands of them. A realization dawned. These were the missing people. Every person who had ever entered this place and never left. I shuddered. "Mark, we have to." But Mark wasn't beside me anymore. My heart lurched. Mark. A laugh. Soft at first, then growing. Ahead, a shape emerged. Mark, but wrong. His grin was too wide, his eyes hollow. "Stay," he whispered. My blood ran cold. It was supposed to be a simple birthday party. My little sister, Emily, had just turned 8, and my parents had gone all out, balloons, cake, a rented event hall. But the highlight of the evening was Mr. Giggles, a clown hired to entertain the kids. He arrived late, his costume slightly wrinkled, his painted grin stretching unnaturally wide. Something about him made me uneasy. His laugh lingered too long, his eyes never quite meeting mine. "For the birthday girl," he cooed, pulling out a balloon animal. Emily clapped, delighted. But as the night wore on, I noticed something chilling. Whenever I looked away, he seemed closer, always near Emily, always watching. As the party ended, I pulled Emily aside. "Do you like the clown?" I asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "He whispers things to me," she said softly. "He says I'm special, that he's coming back for me." A chill ran down my spine. "What did he say exactly?" Her little hands gripped my arm. "That the real fun starts when the lights go out." I turned to find him, but Mr. Giggles was gone. The party hall emptied, the decorations torn down. But something wasn't right. His presence still lingered, like a scent that wouldn't fade. I convinced myself it was paranoia. Until that night, I woke up to a faint squeaking noise, the sound of a balloon being twisted. I sat up, my heart hammering. Emily's room was down the hall, her door ajar. A soft giggle echoed inside. I pushed open the door, my breath catching. Her window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. "Emily?" I whispered. She was sitting on her bed, holding a red balloon. "He was here," she said, her voice eerily calm. "He left me this." My stomach twisted. "Who, Emily?" Her eyes met mine. "Mr. Giggles. He said he'll see me soon." The next morning, I found Emily drawing at the kitchen table, crayons scattered around her. She was focused, her small fingers moving feverishly. "What are you making?" I asked. She lifted the paper. It was a picture of a clown, but not just any clown, Mr. Giggles. His eyes were hollow, his grin sharper than I remembered, and in his hand, he held a child's hand. "That's you, isn't it?" I asked, pointing to the little girl. Emily nodded. My stomach churned. The way he was holding her hand, it wasn't friendly. It was possessive. That night, my parents went out, leaving me alone with Emily. I kept the house locked, my nerves on edge. Around midnight, the phone rang. Static crackled through the receiver. Then a whisper. "Is Emily ready?" My blood froze. "Who is this?" Silence. Then a slow, creeping giggle. The line went dead. My hands trembled as I ran upstairs to check on Emily. Her bed was empty. The window was open again. I sprinted outside, my heart in my throat. The backyard was eerily silent, the moon casting long shadows. Then I saw it, a single red balloon tied to the fence. Then another, leading toward the woods. My breath came in ragged gasps as I followed the trail. The deeper I went, the stronger the feeling of being watched became. The balloons led to an abandoned carnival ground. The rusted Ferris wheel loomed like a skeleton against the night sky. And there, standing under the flickering marquee lights, was Mr. Giggles, holding Emily's hand. "Emily!" I shouted, running toward them. Mr. Giggles cocked his head, his painted grin never faltering. "You're just in time," he said, voice dripping with amusement. "The show's about to start." With a snap of his fingers, the carnival lights blazed to life. Music crackled through unseen speakers, distorted and wrong. The ground shifted beneath me. Suddenly, the carnival wasn't abandoned anymore. Figures emerged from the shadows, more clowns. Dozens of them, their faces twisted, their eyes lifeless. "Run, Emily!" I screamed. She hesitated, but he said we belong here. I grabbed Emily's hand, dragging her toward the nearest building. We stumbled into the House of Mirrors, our reflections warping and twisting around us. The music outside grew louder, the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. "Keep moving," I whispered. But the mirrors weren't just showing our reflections. They were showing other people. Children, staring back at us, their hands pressed against the glass as if trapped inside. "They were here before us," Emily murmured. The giggling started again, closer this time. Then a whisper, "Look behind you." The cornfield behind my grandfather's house stretched for miles. It was a place of childhood adventures, a golden labyrinth where my cousins and I would play hide and seek. But that was before the fire, before the land was abandoned, before people started disappearing. No one planted corn anymore, yet the stalks remained tall, dry, and endless. "It's cursed," my grandfather whispered one night. "Something lives in there." I thought he was just being superstitious, until I heard the laughter, a low, guttural chuckle drifting through the stalks. Every October, our town held the Harvest Moon Festival, complete with hay rides, pumpkin carving, and a corn maze built at the field's edge. "Stay on the path," the signs warned. That year, my best friend, Jake, dared me to explore the old, abandoned part of the field. "Just 5 minutes," he grinned. "Unless you're scared." I wasn't scared, at least not yet. We ducked under the ropes and disappeared into the shadows of the corn. The air grew thick, the stalks swaying though there was no wind. Then, the giggle came again. Closer, Jake and I froze. A shape moved between the stalks, a tall, gangly figure draped in tattered clothing. I held my breath as he stepped into the moonlight. A clown. His suit was filthy, his makeup smeared, his head tilted, eyes glinting beneath the shadow of his hat. "You're not supposed to be here," he murmured. Jake laughed, nudging me. "Nice costume, man." The clown didn't move. Then, slowly, he raised a gloved hand and pointed at me. "You were here before," he whispered. I remember. My stomach dropped. I had never seen him before in my life. I grabbed Jake's arm. "Let's go." But Jake, ever the fearless one, stepped closer. "Chill, dude. It's just some townie messing with us." The clown grinned, revealing rows of yellowed teeth. "Not messing," he said softly. "Harvesting." Then, faster than I thought possible, he lunged. I turned and ran. Jake screamed, cutting through the night. I crashed through the corn, stalks slicing at my arms, heart hammering. I burst out onto the festival grounds, gasping. But Jake never came out. The town searched the field for weeks. No sign of Jake. The police questioned me over and over. "You're sure you saw a clown?" I nodded, but doubt crept in. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe Jake had just run away. The festival was shut down, the corn maze dismantled, but the old field remained untouched. No one dared enter. My grandfather pulled me aside one evening, his face pale. "He saw you," he whispered. "He won't stop now." A year passed. Jake was forgotten by most, but not by me. I had nightmares of the clown's face, of his whisper. Then one night, I heard it again, the laughter, low, distorted, echoing from the field. I peered out my window. The corn swayed though the air was still. A shadow moved between the stalks. I pressed a hand against the glass, my breath shallow. A shape stood at the field's edge. A clown, holding something in his hand. A bundle of red strings, like puppet strings. And I swear, in the moonlight, I saw fingers at the ends. I refused to go back. But the nightmares got worse. Whispers calling my name. Jake's voice, pleading. He still has me. Finally, I broke. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the field alone. The deeper I went, the stranger things became. Corn stalks twisted unnaturally. The air felt thick, suffocating. Then under my foot, a crunch. A bone. My stomach turned. The ground was littered with them. Some small, some not. And then a giggle right behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking. The clown stood there, his face cracked and peeling, as if the pain had fused to his skin. "You came back," he whispered. I stumbled backward, tripping over the roots. When I looked up, he was gone. But something else caught my eye, a structure deep within the field. A forgotten farmhouse, its roof sagging, windows dark. I had never seen it before. My pulse pounded. Maybe Jake was in there. Maybe he never left. The house smelled of damp rot and something metallic. Inside, old furniture was covered in sheets, dust thick in the air. Then I saw it, a small room filled with wooden mannequins. No, not mannequins. Puppets, dressed in torn clothes, their faces painted like clowns. My stomach churned. Then a whisper from the shadows. "Help me." I turned, my flashlight landing on a figure bound in the corner. Jake, his skin pale, his wrists tied with red string. He lifted his head, eyes wide. "He's coming," he croaked. The laughter erupted all around us. The clown stepped into the room, dragging a wooden marionette behind him. "I made him special for you," he grinned. My breath caught. The puppet looked like me. Same hair, same eyes. Its lips curled into a grotesque smile. One more piece and he'll be perfect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a human tooth. My tooth. My mind reeled. How had he? Then I remembered. Last year, after the festival, I had lost a tooth. Thought I misplaced it, but he had it all along. Jake, and I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a lantern off the wall and hurled it. Flames erupted, licking up the wooden walls. The clown shrieked, his face contorting. "You don't understand," he howled. "The harvest never ends." The puppets twitched, their painted eyes rolling. The strings pulled tighter, as if something unseen controlled them. We ran, the fire engulfing everything. The field ignited behind us, flames swallowing the corn. The laughter twisted into a scream, inhuman and endless. By morning, the field was gone. Only blackened earth remained. The authorities found nothing. No house, no puppets, no clown. Jake and I tried to move on, but we both knew. He wasn't gone. Not really. Then, weeks later, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single object, a wooden marionette. Its mouth stretched into a painted grin, and hanging from its limbs red strings.